news story about Astellas and that CRO. There was a big CRO.
Yeah, crazy story.
Crazy stories. Are we? Is it
all
live?
right, guys? We are live here.
All right.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Jamie. We have another really great session, and specifically a panel discussion today, which is really exciting. This one is all focused on inspections. So as you guys fold in, let us know, throw your inspection related questions into the chat. Are there things that you just need to know that you don't know, or if there are questions that you have for folks that have been through certain inspections, throw them into the chat, throw them into the Q&A. We will try and get to them at the end of the panel discussion. We have a really fun session planned with some great speakers that have a ton of experience with inspections from regulatory authorities across the world. And my job today is very small, but Jamie's job is very large, and Jamie Toth is going to be moderating the panel. So Jamie, I'll hand it over to you, and then maybe we'll go around the table with the guests.
Sounds great. Thanks, Oliver. All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And hi, Steph. I see you did the shout out, and also Heather. I know several of you out there in the virtual world. So nice to see you all. So my name is Jamie Toth. I'm the Global Head of Trial Master File Management and Records at BeiGene. So I'm pleased to be with you today, having coffee with my peers in the industry. We're going to talk about inspections. So let's start with Christina. Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. So I'm Christina Monastero. I am the lead for clinical document management at Larimar. I've been in the industry, I guess, for about 14 years now, but the bulk of my experience has been in TMF. So I'm very familiar with inspections, and I've been lucky enough to participate in quite a few of them. And my most recent experience is pretty FDA centric. So looking forward to being a part of the panel.
Awesome. Thanks. And Liz, how about you?
Hi, Liz Farrell. I'm the Director of Trial Master File Process at Agios Pharmaceuticals. I was previously the TMF process owner at Biogen for about 9 years. So I've been in the TMF specific space for over 10 years, but in the industry, certainly for about 15 now. I'm going to start lying about that number at some point. But I've been in TMF focus definitely for a while, and excited to be talking about inspections.
Fantastic. All right, over to JP.
Hi, everyone. It's JP Michelli, Director of Document Management at Advanced Clinical. I'm definitely going to start lying about my experience now. I think this is year number 19 overall in the TMF, so I'm just going to stay on that number for a while. Been with Advanced Clinical for almost 5 years now. All of my experience prior to that was on the sponsor side, so I've had a good mix of inspection experiences over the years, and in the past few years with the FDA and MHRA.
Fantastic. All right. And finally, Hobson.
Yeah, Hobson Lopes. I am at Regeneron, where I manage all of our fund records for our entire global development organization. I am still okay to say how long I've been in the industry, at 10 years, all in the TMF and records management space. Yeah, I've had a good amount of inspection experience to talk about, so I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. What a great panel, huh? And I see some other shout outs. So hi, April, and Mayuki Taguchi, who I used to work with in Japan. So nice to see you out there in the virtual world. So you're in store for some great information. So so I wanted to ask, and I'm going to start with Liz, give us some experience that you've had for the health authority inspections in the last 3 years.
Sure. So my most recent inspection experience was just about a year and a half ago with the FDA. I'm currently preparing for an MHRA inspection that is due to happen in the next coming weeks, but have been through several MHRA inspections in the past. I think I'm just hitting the 3-year mark with my most recent active. Have also gone through a Health Canada inspection, a routine GCP inspection from the sponsor side about 3 years ago as well. Before that, have been through some PMDA inspections and certainly the gamut that Biogen had at that time.
Fantastic. And I guess, Hobson, what other agencies have you had experience with?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the last 3 years, I've only had mostly the big ones, right? I've had the FDA, I've had the PMDA, I've had the FDA and PMDA together at the same time. And then over the course of time, EMA and other smaller authorities that have come and looked at our sites or done other things that we need to prepare for.
Fantastic. All right. So before we get into some polls, I want to ask JP, what does inspection readiness mean to you?
It means time to lock down and really get ready for, the inspectors that are coming in. So it's obviously an ongoing thing, and I know we're going to talk about this in a lot more detail, but it's not something that we start as soon as we find out about an inspection. So it's really making sure everything is in place beforehand, taking those steps, within your eTMF system to ensure the best state of inspection readiness prior to that event.
All right. And Christina, what about you?
I agree. I think it's a continuous activity. Actually, that starts when we start to develop a protocol. So I think, it's really sort of a cultural mindset shift to integrate like quality and risk management and just making sure our processes are really robust, that they capture all the requirements in the regions that we're operating in, and that they generate high quality data.
Awesome. And so Hobson, do you have anything else to add to what does inspection readiness mean to Hobson Lopes?
The inspection readiness Hobson Lopes means it's maybe not the meaning, but it's like a mantra that you have to live by, right? We can't just assume that we're going to be good to go with an inspection when we're told 2 weeks ago that it's happening, right? It's having that mindset, but it's also getting the buy-in from everybody else that they need to have that same mindset. And hoping that people pay attention to you when you bring up some horror stories or explain some situations that have happened to you already, and hope that they, learn and adjust and not just ignore it.
Awesome. All right. So I think at this time, we're going to bring up some polls. So Oliver, if you can start the first poll, I need to let my puppy out the door back here. Sorry about that. No. Go on. Thank you. All right. So that was Oliver, the Boston Terrier, leaving the room. So Oliver, if you can start the polls, please.
Perfect. The polls are in the Engage tab. You should see a little poll section. The first poll is available. So have you been in an inspection? Is it A, in the last 6 months, B, over a year ago, C, 2 to 5 years ago, or D, never? We'll give you guys a few minutes to respond, and we'll get a survey of the audience to see what everyone's experience level is in inspections.
Ah, look at that. Never. Oh, here we go. 2 to 5, over a year.
Oh, it's all over the place.
It is all over the place.
We'll give everybody a little bit more time. We'll give everybody a view of what that looks like. So you can see it jumping around. We'll give everybody 30 more seconds.
All right.
And I'm going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So it looks like most of the audience here, Jamie, have either never been in an inspection or it was a while ago.
Okay. So that 32-ish%, you guys are probably like, whoa, this is easy working in pharma, right? So I've been in the pharma industry for about 20 years. And I can tell you, I've seen the gamut, as Liz said earlier, of the inspections from all in paper to hybrid to now electronic. So that's pretty interesting. And I think what you're going to find from the panel today and the experience that we're going to be sharing is in the last 6 months to year, because of so it's after COVID or post COVID, and some of the things that have occurred post COVID. So great. So let's see the next poll. So number 2, what kind of inspection? Let's see. Pull that up. Everyone completed that already, or no? Nope. So what kind of inspection did you participate in? So for those who were in an inspection, if you weren't in an inspection, 32%, you can probably not answer this, in case that wasn't obvious. And just a shout out to a few more peeps that I see out there in the Q&A. Charlie, nice to see you. I think that's the only. Oh, and April also. So nice to see you out in the virtual land. All right, what does poll number 2 look like? So, what kinds of inspections have you been in?
So it looks like majority is on site. Still 30% roughly virtual inspections, which is interesting.
3, 4.
All right, I'm going to end the poll.
Okay. All right. So majority on site looks like all of the above, which that is something that we've been seeing lately. And then hybrid, virtual, and on site. Yep. All right. And we're going to have the panel actually speak to a lot of this in the coming questions. Okay. And let's go to number 3. So again, if you've been in an inspection, the experience that you've had, if you've been part of more than one health authority, then put it, oh, we got a typo there, Oliver. It's MHRA, not Mr. Ha. So,
Sounds more fun that way.
Yeah, it does. Don't anyone tell Andy Fisher I said that, but Mr. Ha would be a great health authority to come and see us, I guess. So if you have more than one, put it in the chat. We'll be looking at the chat as well to see the experience of the health authority.
Mostly FDA.
All right. So what are we saying? Let's see. FDA.
And nobody with the PMDA yet.
No one with PMDA. That's interesting.
Oh, there they go.
There we
I say something and it happens.
It's quite interesting, right? Because you guys all get these metrics on the GCP inspections, right? Well, I have to print them all because there's so many pages long, and I need a magnifying glass because most of the little footnotes are like you can barely like see what it says. So I do have, I think, the biggest magnifying glass. So I have in front of me the EMA from 2021. I have MHRA from 2019 to March 2020, and then FDA. Good on the FDA. Theirs is actually most current because it's for fiscal year 2022. So combining them all together is what we're going to share with you today. And all right, so looking at the poll, FDA 62%, Health Canada 9.5%, EMA only 4.8%, Mr. Ha about 20%. MHRA, and then PMDA about 4.8. All right. So last poll that we wanted to ask all of you to kind of get a sense of our audience. What do you want to hear more about, right? So is it FDA? Is it Health Canada, Mr. Ha, or PMDA? So tell us that in the poll because we have the collective panel here has all of this experience and more that we want to share with you. So I'm gonna do that. It looks like FDA, MHRA. It's interesting, right? Not as interested in EMA. And I will tell you, if you've ever been in an EMA inspection, I have, you probably want to know something about EMA. Right? What do you think, JP?
I think so. Yeah. It's important.
Toughest, I would say, to date, from my experience. Not only that, they come in multiples, right? Not just one, not just two, not just three.
Yeah, it's been over 3 years since my last EMA inspection, but it was certainly one of the toughest ones I've been through.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So we got a little bit other, let's see if there's other in here in the chat. Health Canada, FDA. Someone agrees with me. Thank you. Feedback from health authorities regarding preferred systems. All right. FDA, EMA, SFDA. FDA and EMA. Okay, so it looks like a combo. MHRA, FDA, PMDA, sorry, FDA. Hi, Steph. Steph's out there also, guys. All right. Okay, great. So Oliver, you can probably end that poll and we can get started. So 33, 12, 18, 22, 10, 2. Okay. All right. So earlier, Christina talked about her definition of inspection readiness, and so did JP and Hobson, and they talked about doing things at the protocol start. So when you think of that, doing things at the beginning, there's a process called continuous improvement, or CIP, continuous improvement process. And with that is the activity of plan, do, check, act. So PDCA is what they call it. So we're going to talk about PDCA with all of you because inspection readiness shouldn't be, oh my gosh, it's happening in 2 weeks. Inspection readiness should be planned out well ahead of time, and not, when things are really at their most critical point leading up to an inspection. So having said that, I'm going to start with Liz. If you can tell the audience, when you're planning, what do you do when you're planning for inspections? What kind of prep work, maybe what tools you create?
Sure. So in my specific role, where I tend to not work on an individual study, I'm responsible for the governance of the TMF management, for establishing the processes, but there's a lot of individuals obviously on the study teams that need support, whether it's emotional or knowledge support leading into an inspection. I think one of the main activities that I tend to do and how I prepare is to meet with the study teams, meet with the functional teams to help them understand, depending on the agency that's we're preparing an inspection for, to prepare them for the line of questioning and how the TMF might find its way into questioning, whether it's so overt or not. I think that's one of the biggest tools I've found, is talking to the individuals who are working on the studies and making sure that they don't think the TMF piece of it is scary, and help them understand what parts of review of the TMF, their typical study checks that they're already performing, how to articulate that in a way that proves that we're following our process, that we're managing our TMF in a compliant way, and that it's not something they need to worry and be scared of how to speak to the inspector about. What I do personally is summarize some storyboard activities. I'll create some cheat sheet type information if there was a study migration, if there was something unique about how the TMF was managed for a study. It's hard to keep a lot of that in track depending on your portfolio size. So I like to create some of those tools for myself to remember what's unique about this study and how do I succinctly speak about that should I need to.
And having said that, right, if the study was acquired or there was a transfer, that's all good to know up front, instead of like trying to build it all when it happened maybe 2 years ago. So great point.
Absolutely.
So JP, at what point do you start inspection and readiness with your teams?
Yeah, so I can offer a little different perspective from the CRO side. So we obviously follow a lot of sponsor guidance on it, but we really try to build that into our activities early on, include that in the TMF plan, that we agree upon with the sponsor, and we follow a lot of their guidance as well. We also have to incorporate our compliance and quality team who participates in those inspection activities. So it's a little bit of a different view than what most of you might see from the sponsor side, but we still try to build those early on into the process so that, like I mentioned earlier on, we're not scrambling at the end as soon as an inspection is ready to start and take place.
Okay.
And for us, it's really about, things that we do for planning is really making sure we know who those points of contact are from the sponsor, making sure the communication pathways are established on who's going to actually, be involved in those activities with the regulatory agency.
And do you feel that everyone raises their hand and says, pick me, pick me?
No, they do not. But, that's part of the partnership and try and come up with the best process and making sure that we're fulfilling the needs of the inspection and, showing that we have everything under control and we're not a scattered mess. Like you said, just everyone just trying to, grab at certain things. But yeah, it's, something that we try to plan early on.
Okay. So as part of that planning, so Liz, I'm going to ask you this question. Do you seek out individuals who go through some kind of process to get them prepared? So maybe they don't say, the wrong thing or something like that.
It may be individuals. Usually it's functions in my personal experience where there are certain functions who don't touch the TMF on a day-to-day basis quite as often and may need some coaching, honestly, in saying the right thing in the right way. What I find a lot is those other functions that do hold TMF content. I'm thinking biostatistics. I'm thinking the safety teams. They have so much content that flows into the TMF, but it may not look the same way. Their processes may not look the same as the clinical operations folks. They might not be logging in the system quite as often. So I try to target those functions that can sometimes shirk off how involved they are in TMF, not even realizing that they do TMF in their day-to-day life. They just need to get some coaching on articulating that in a way that's appropriate and correct. So I guess I seek out functions rather than people.
Good word, articulate. That's a great word in the planning to make sure all the articulation is done and everyone knows how to articulate. So Hobson, I'm going to ask you, I know looking at the various reports, MHRA, EMA, FDA, we still see, in particular FDA in fiscal year 2022, still see records management and essential documents as like a big finding from the FDA. So do you, so there's this inspection readiness bell curve, right? And Andrew Fisher at various conferences have shared the bell curve of, inspection announced, and then you see the curve of all the documents starting to load. Do you share that information with your teams and kind of, tell them like, this is not where we want to be? Tell us what you do there.
Yeah, and I'm going to hope my internet doesn't kick me out again in a second. We do share it. So one of the first things I do when I start inspection prep work with the study, coming in after the fact, right? I'm not on any study team. My team comes in after and supports readiness activities. One of the first things I show them is that report that we have in our system that shows, here's what you've uploaded every month. And I'll be like, all right, your average over the course of 3 years is 1,200 documents a month. Why are there these 4,000 document months, right? Get those figured out now, so when the question comes, answer them. But then also the goal is kind of like as you were touching on, is to really make sure that they're thinking about it all the time and not just saying, okay, yep, now there's an inspection, now we need to get that backlog caught up on. There shouldn't be a backlog. It's not something that should be actually going on, right? You should be getting those documents on time. You should be getting them good quality, and we shouldn't see such intense spikes like that unless you have, a migration that you did from another system or something. You shouldn't have those spikes. So it's always one of the first things that I show teams and just tell them to get prepared to speak to it in case they're asked about it. Great point.
So in the interest of time, we're going to move into the D in PDCA. So we're moving into do. So Christina, for the various health inspections that you've been part of, what has your experience been during the inspection for how they differ?
I think they're all different, really. So they all have their own unique sort of way of doing things. And like you said earlier, they can really vary in things like notification. So you may get a couple months of a notification. You may get 1 day of notification to prepare for an inspection. you may have like one inspector versus a team of inspectors that show up. There are some inspectors that really like to be in your systems and like to ask a lot of questions. And they feel that, you know, everything should be there and should tell the whole story and they shouldn't need to go to you for questions. So like European agencies, for example, there are some that don't want to be involved in your systems at all and will just simply make document requests from, you know, the front room, back room setup. And so although I think that is changing with some of the agencies. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of variables that really change every time we deal with a different regulatory authority. And I would say like one of the big things in terms of preparations is really familiarizing yourself with the way that they conduct inspections and what you can expect. Because there is so much variability and it's hard for us to plan if there's so many things that can kind of change.
Absolutely. So carrying on with that same thread, Liz, what's been your experience with the different agencies, maybe Health Canada, FDA, PMDA, requiring direct access or guided access and the request of documents? Have you seen a lot of variation with that?
Yes. So the FDA, in my experience, has, I think to Christina's point, really not wanted that direct access. They've wanted to use document requests. Again, I know that there are some, you know, there's variability inspector to inspector, but overall, my experience has been with FDA that they have not been interested in that direct type of access and would prefer to rely on document requests. MHRA, I think across the board is always going, you know, it's a given that they will want that direct access into your primary eTMF system. Although I have seen variability within the MHRA on what other supplementary systems they may want access to, some of which may hold some TMF content, some of which may be something like your EDC system. So the MHRA, I guess, is the heaviest touch I've experienced, where the FDA has been the lightest. I was surprised at Health Canada and how much they mimicked what I've experienced with MHRA. We were one of their earlier sponsor inspections, so it was kind of the trailblazing inspection for them on how they were going to be approaching it. And it appeared to me that they were mimicking a lot of the MHRA's protocols.
Okay. And Hobson, talk to us about, because your role is you know, different, I think, from all the rest. So talk to us a little bit about data integrity and how does data integrity impact inspections and what the inspectors are looking for?
Oh boy, data integrity, that's the big one, right? I think as we're talking about different authorities, I think they all have that same mindset in mind of making sure that we are doing things the right way and we're following basic data integrity standards, right? And I think when it comes to any of the prep work that we're doing, and even any of the stuff that we're doing, like during the inspection when people are screaming and running around and people are trying to answer responses, and it's keeping that data integrity piece in mind, right? We don't want to just go and change how we do things because someone's screaming in our ear about something they don't like, right? Just because an inspector doesn't like it, like how we do something, if that's how our process says it's done, right? It's following that and making sure that we're not losing anything just because they're screaming. And screaming is literal, right? They don't scream, right? They speak nice and soft to you and just tell you you're doing things wrong. But I think that's where we just need to not always be concerned about it and not really, you know, forget what we are doing and why we're doing it.
So I think, and again, going back to these reports, both EMA and MHRA, so MHRA from 2019, EMA 2021, talked about data integrity and audit trails and computer systems being part of, you know, what they are looking at and also what they're giving findings for. So those are all very relevant that we need to be aware of. And even the FDA report did talk about data integrity as well as systems. So I think with the onset of technology and these systems now, we all need to be looking even more closely at data integrity, our audit trails, and how data is also flowing. So we're going to move into ACT because I am looking at time and looking at questions coming in. So into check, excuse me. So PDCA. So we're going to move into check. So Christina, share with us some quality checks that have been done at your organization to get either during inspection readiness or before inspection readiness or what have you.
Sure. So I think I'll just preface this by saying I'm new to my organization now, so we haven't yet put processes in place for some of this stuff. So I'll speak generally to like what I've done in the past and also what I've seen at other organizations. So I think a lot of us have sort of a multi-level check. So as documents go into the TMF, we're reviewing them for things like good documentation practice. So high level Alcoa, making sure they're filed correctly, the document content is acceptable as is. And then there's also sort of a more in-depth review is like a functional review. So more assessing, do we have all of the records in the TMF to demonstrate we're compliant with the processes and the regulations kind of cross-functionally. So I think if you can keep up with that and, make sure it's being done on an ongoing basis, making sure that you're evaluating and assessing your compliance with your study processes, that ideally, once you get to the time to prepare for inspection, a lot of that's already done, right? And we know what our gaps are, and we've been able to kind of action those. So I think if you can do that up front, it really saves us time on the back end from the inspection readiness side. And then just as part of inspection readiness and preparations, like developing checklists and toolkits that kind of help us from a specific agency perspective to look at what are the things that they look at, what processes do we have to support their inspectional focus, and then what is the evidence or output of our processes that kind of support that. So it makes it easier to pull all that together when you know that your documentation's fully complete and everything's there and high quality.
And Christina, we're getting like some feedback. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, thank you. So I think again, in the interest of time, I'm looking at our countdown here. So from an example of ACT, Liz, can you give us some KPIs that your organization reports on for inspection readiness activities?
My current organization is working on developing some of those, and we're a pretty new company in terms of experiencing inspection. So as we're preparing right now, some of that's coming to light of what would we like to know at the moment, and how could we articulate that, or how could we put that together for future. In my past, many of our TMF checks were part of our overall study health metrics that were reported up through whether it was our quality councils or our partnerships with our CROs and JOCs. Mostly from my perspective, how I would contribute to the inspection readiness KPIs or the inspection KPIs are in how prepared are we, and whether or not after the inspection, what we reported on in preparation rang true. If we're seeing that we were reporting at 90 to 100% leading up to the inspection, but we resulted in a major finding, for example, taking that information back and understanding whether the KPI was accurate is also part of that continuous improvement process that I think is an important part of using your metrics and KPIs.
Great. All right. So I am going to open it up now to questions from the audience. I do have a few more questions for the panel, but let's see if there's questions from the audience. I have seen some things in the chat about FDA, just to comment on, yes, we did hear at the FDA, from the FDA inspector who presented at the US TMF Summit that direct access is what they are going to be looking for now from FDA. I can tell you in November of 2022, I experienced EMA and FDA inspection. And the FDA was there with EMA to learn and observe. So they're learning from EMA on how they're approaching things and how they're doing different things. And they were actually asking during breaks some of the EMA inspectors questions. So they are going along on some of these inspections to learn. So that is something that we are seeing recently. So
Jamie, I can add to that.
Yeah.
It kind of speaks to the variability that Christina and Liz both brought up about, the scope of an inspection based on an individual inspector. So we just had an FDA inspection less than 2 months ago, and they wanted nothing but direct access. So again, I know sometimes they're looking to just do document requests, but it really does depend on the individual inspector.
Yeah, that's very true. Back a couple years ago, and Hobson and I were, well, not together, but our companies were in a similar area in New Jersey, and the same inspector went to inspect both of us in a matter of months, and it was all document pulls, and he wanted everything printed, and we had to address them by a certain title and things like that. So very, very different than what we are seeing today, and that was probably in 2018, 2019. So questions from the audience, if you want to put it in the chat and we will address it.
Maybe there are a bunch in the Q&A section.
Okay, let's see. Please touch on mock inspections. Sure. So does anyone want to share their experience with mock inspections?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So
Okay.
I think mock inspections are a incredible tool to prepare. I've had conversations with some people who said that they didn't think their company needed them. And I think there is no better way to really give someone that feeling of having the pressure on them to get a request done in 2 hours than to put them through the fire drill of the mock inspection. Yes, they can be costly. Yes, they are a burden and will make people have to give up a week of their time or however long that mock's going to be from doing their day-to-day job. But unless you've been through an inspection, you don't know what you get out of it. And a mock inspection with a good mock inspector will get you the experience and get your team that experience.
Okay, great. Let's see. So there's a question around ECRFs. Does anyone want to answer that? So if clinical data is captured in software, ECRF, how that can be linked into eTMF and subsequently available during inspection for inspector review.
That's not something I have experience with. We haven't had that direct link like that. So it's not something I can speak to.
Okay. JP, any?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Hobson with that.
Okay.
We don't have that link.
All right, so let me move on. Inspectors are asking about document retention processes depending on document type within TMF, as well as other authorized systems that can house TMF content. Is this your experience?
Yeah, I can jump in, and I would say yes and no. I guess the overall TMF and everything that we've indicated in our TMF index based on the reference model to our organization falls under the same retention requirement, because the TMF, although it's a collection of records, is a whole in of itself. So we do establish that the entire TMF does need to be retained for the same amount of time, regardless of if it's in disparate systems. Each of those systems may have their own archival strategy, and it may vary at what point they are archived, but we do retain for the same amount of time.
Okay. All right. What does your storyboarding activity look like? Is it only based on eTMF data? Who wants to handle that?
I think they can be broader storyboards, so not just specific to the eTMF, but specific to how you manage certain issues on your study. Sometimes people also use storyboards to just kind of refresh on key issues, so they're really good for like remembering history, especially when you have transitions and complicated processes. So if you don't have things like diagrams and flowcharts, which are a really, really great tool to kind of align on complicated processes like how you manage IP or clinical data flow, storyboards are a good backroom tool for that as well, to kind of get the team sort of aligned and aligned in their messaging.
Okay, great. Let's see. There's quite a few from an anonymous user asking about tools used before, during, and after inspections. Checklist tools. So any checklist tools that could be used and tools to be used before, during, or after inspections to ensure inspection readiness.
I can take that one. I feel like I've done a lot of this over the last couple of years. So for those who are familiar with FDA, they have like what they call their BIMO manual. So it's their Bioresearch Monitoring Compliance Program manual. A lot of us refer to it as BIMO, where they actually give you basically step-by-step what they are going to look at during inspection. So assuming that you don't send them off into a different direction, they will pretty much stick to that list. So it's a good thing to look at the criteria of what they're looking at during inspection, and that kind of helps you guide activities you may need to do, focus areas you may need to prep your functional areas on, and actually other agencies as well, like EMA and MHRA. If you go online, they have a lot of resources, I think, that can help you with understanding what their focus areas are going to be. And to the earlier points made, definitely review the GCP inspection metrics, because I think that also gives you a really good idea of what they're starting to focus on. So you can make sure you have processes in place around those areas as well.
And I will add to that that the PMDA also has a very prescriptive checklist for their inspection protocols. So it really help focus teams on where to best use their energy in terms of preparation activities.
Great. There's another question. Are signposts acceptable in the TMF to an inspector? For example, signposts in the safety zone to Argus. Anyone?
I would say yes. I mean, referencing out to other source systems that, as long as the system is compliant, has access controls, is able to run audit trails, has all of the Part 11 requirements, it is completely appropriate if it's fit for purpose for the organization. If you're pointing out to too many different places, in my experience, that's where you can start getting some frustration from the inspectors of wanting to find at least enough to tell one part of the story all in one location. But it is appropriate as long as it's documented and you can be clear with the inspectors about where they can find certain information.
And just one extra piece on that, and making sure that those system owners are aware of this, right? We don't, when you're creating your index or you're modifying your index for your business needs, don't just point to Argus without telling them that, right? Work with them, work with their SMEs to make sure that they are prepared and able to do what they need to do in the event of an inspection.
There's actually, in the EMA inspection report, there's actually a company that got a finding for lack of signposting to other systems to know where the relevant TMF content was. So again, read these reports. They are definitely published for our usage and our best practice, well, our continued best practices and lessons learned. All right, so we have 3 minutes left. So thank you, audience, for your questions. I have one final question for the panel, and I'm going to ask you each individually, starting with JP. What one lessons learned do you want to share with the audience to prepare them for an inspection in the future?
All right, I'm going to give my perspective from the CRO side again. Make sure as a sponsor, because I know there are many sponsor people on this call, make sure you stay involved in those inspection activities and do not just pass it on completely to your CRO, even though they're technically managing the study for you. Any kind of lack of oversight is certainly going to raise a red flag, and the regulatory agency will want to address that if they see that. So they do not just want to speak to us as the CRO, they also want to speak to the sponsor as well. So we've been through that experience before, and it is certainly something that we advise, the sponsor to stay as involved as possible in those inspection activities.
Thank you, JP. Liz, one lessons learned.
To not underestimate the value in repeat messaging around TMF and systems that are used in the TMF, and saying it over and over and over again to folks who may be part of the inspection. I think it sinks in depending on the format of communication you're using, and the more that you can get a nugget in their brain to remember how to speak about the TMF appropriately, the better off you'll be.
Awesome. And Christina?
I'd say just prepare for anything, because anything can happen. There's always stuff we can't predict that comes up during an inspection. It happens no matter how prepared you are. So I think it's just, they're really, really great learning opportunities. Sometimes that's hard, but it is a great learning opportunity. So dry run your processes, make sure that you're prepared for everything, especially in a changing landscape.
And finally, Hobson, one lessons learned.
with seconds to spare, don't get too comfortable. Not like the inspection you just had is not going to be the inspection you're going to have in the future. It might have been easy. It might have been whatever. It's not the same. Don't get comfortable.
Look at that, right on time. What a fantastic panel. And they all paid attention and followed the timeline. I couldn't ask for a better panel. So in summary, right? So involve the CRO and sponsors together. Don't underestimate the value of TMF, the TMF group, the processes, the system. Prepare for anything. It's always a great learning opportunity, and don't be comfortable. So get out of your comfort zone. And thanks everyone for attending today. And if you have questions, you can reach out to any one of us on the panel, and have a great day.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody,
Thanks,
for
everyone.
what an amazing panel. It's been so fun just to sit back and watch you guys animate such an interesting topic. One last kind of tidbit from me. Just want to let everybody know that today, or throughout TMF week, in fact, we are running a TMF pulse check. If you want to get your hands on some snazzy kicks with I Heart TMF embroidered into them, something to wear maybe at your next TMF conference in person, something to impress your colleagues around the office. The link to the survey is posted in the chat. I will post it again because everyone's saying thank you. It takes 3 or 4 minutes to respond. It gives us a ton of really interesting information that we'll share with you afterwards, and you could be in a chance to win a brand new pair of snazzy kicks. There you go. I'm sure everybody on our panel wants a pair of those, right?
Are they Nike or are they Converse?
They're Converse. They're Converse. But we could do a special edition, Jamie Toth edition.
Yeah, I would like the Jamie Toth Nike edition. That would be fabulous.
There you go. You finally get your shoe deal after all these years.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. We're going to take a quick break for lunch. If you want to interact with anybody else, you can head over to the chat panel. You can go to the lounge, whatever it might be. We're back at 1 p.m. Eastern for another awesome session, finishing the day around 3 p.m. Eastern today. And then we have tons of really great sessions coming up tomorrow and on Thursday. Thank you again, panelists. It's been awesome, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.